This computer. Let's see what we got here. We got 538. Let's see how many friends we got. All right. Before we get started, any questions, comments, ice cream suggestions? We won't say pizza tonight. We'll stay out of that. Anything before we get started?
You just said it, Kyle. So.
I did. But that will be the last time. I swear. Hands off the argument tonight.
No more mention of that.
Nope. It is the food we do not speak of in this. Oh gosh.
Those are fun.
All right. Well, we will get started here. Happy Monday, everybody, to whoever is a Buccaneers fan out there. A sad, cold, gloomy Monday for anyone who is a Chiefs fan out there, and a moderate Monday for anyone who enjoyed those commercials, such as me. I think they were okay this year. They're pretty decent. I had a couple that I really liked. It's better than I expected for the COVID days, so I really like them. So hope everyone had a good Super Bowl Sunday, or just a normal Sunday, however you wanted to enjoy it, and has had a great Monday to begin with, as much as we can, as it's cloudy out there. Trying to think. Today we are going to be talking about, let's see what time is. Got everything going. Cool, I am recording. All right. So yeah, today we're going to be talking about spring MVC and controllers. I hope everyone has enjoyed the reading on this, at least dabbled a little bit in it, enjoyed the exercise, or maybe is going to enjoy the studio here, as well as seeing all the practices it takes, what we've learned in Java so far to get to this point. So I hope everyone's excited to start this new stuff today. Before we do that, as always, I'm going to go into announcements. Really nothing too much for the upcoming week. We're going to have I have to look and make sure. I believe we have lecture on Thursday, but I know that we have limited amount of things to do on Thursday. We can talk about that later. I do apologize for the studio last week coming out a little bit late. As we saw, it came out on Thursday. I hope it did help anybody who did watch it. Additionally, I do apologize for this week. That studio is also going to be a little bit delayed. Hopefully not as much up onto Thursday this week, but the studio videos do take a little bit more time, and unfortunately, my work life has been a little extra in the past few weeks. So really trying to do that balancing act, but I will get that video to you all as soon as I possibly can. I promise. So just wanted to give you guys all of that. One last thing, I guess there are a few more announcements, but I just didn't put them here. Not really an announcement though, more like a disclaimer. Like I said, we're starting MVC, we're starting controllers, and we're starting Spring here. I just want to start out class telling you that though I might sound like I know what I'm talking about all the time and try to answer your questions to the fullest, no coder can always know everything. MVC, Spring, and controllers is a specific architecture that though I am familiar with it, and have some knowledge about it, I'm not in any case an expert. So as we move forward here, if I can't answer any of your questions, which I still do ask everyone to ask as many questions as possible, if I don't know it off the top of my head, I will not lie to you. I'm extremely transparent when I don't know something, and we will look it up and we'll find the answer together. So I just want to let you know that I might be caught off guard by something in the MVC architecture. You might see that into these teachings, but I am always having that willingness to learn, and I hope you will learn with me. And please, again, never hesitate to ask those questions. We will get to the bottom of them. All right. So is everybody ready? Everybody good? Everybody say yes? Or at least have a thumbs up. Anything?
Sure.
Okay.
Meh? Kinda?
Yeah.
Kind of going into it?
Go, Kyle.
There we go. See, that's what I want to hear. Get your coffee, everybody. Get your sugar. Get your ice cream. It's Monday, and we're going to start doing this thing. So let's start by how we always do. Let's start wagging our tails, get our thoughts warmed up after that long weekend. We're going to create a dog class as always. So how do we start creating a class, in particular dog? What do we start with?
Public class.
Public class, dog.
And then dog. Very good. Public class dog. This is how we always start our classes in Java. Next, how do we add a name to our dog? In particular, a class variable.
Private.
Say that again.
Private string name.
Very good. Private string name. That's how we start it. We're not going to initialize it in line here. We want to initialize it through a constructor. So how do we build that constructor?
Public dog.
Dog.
Very good. And we take in that string name into the parameters of the constructor to set our class variable to that name, in particular Stark, my favorite dog name in the world. What about creating a toString method for this dog class that prints out the name when we ask for the toString? What do we start with? If we want to define the method first.
Override, add override.
Very good. As well as that public string toString method. And then yes, absolutely, that at override. What do we call at override? What is this called? It starts with an A.
Annotation.
An annotation. Very good. Remember those at signs particularly mean annotation. So we at override to override this toString method for our dog class. Now if we made an instance of dog and we called it toString, who can tell me what it would print out if we named our dog Stark in this example? What would it return?
My dog's name is Stark.
Very good. Exactly. It would call to that class variable, append it to that string, and return my dog's name is Stark. Very good. Let's move on. Can someone tell me, reconnecting with a long lost friend here, how do we start a web page? What tags do we always start with? I'm not also looking for the document type here, though if you're thinking about that, that's also something to begin with. But what are the two tags that always start and end our website or web page?
Header and footer.
HTML, the opening and closing tag.
Very good. We always, always, always start out with HTML. This is how any web page anywhere in the world will begin and end. HTML tags. Next thing that go into HTML tags. What are the tags that indicate the start of the things we see on a website? Visual, what we see.
Body.
Body.
Very good. Body. We're not going to put this one in this example, but what's the other tags that go inside of HTML? The things that we don't see. Very good. The head. H-E-A-D. But right now we're only going to deal with body. How would we create text for the size of H3? What were the tags that we'd use for this, for that size H3?
Headers. H3.
Headers tag.
Very good. It was really hard to phrase that one as a question because it really does give it to you in the question, but this is exactly how it is. You use that H3 tags, my dog HTML, and then you close H3. Very good. What if we wanted to create a text box? What do we start with?
Input. Input
Very
text.
good. Input. Type text. Very good. And now we want to give it a name. What is the attribute that we use? Kind of already said it.
Value.
Not
Name.
necessarily value in a text
Name.
box. You want to use name. Very good. And in this case, I'm going to name it my dog's name. This is going to create as a text box. There we go. Cool. All right, sorry. So a question there. Moving on. What if we wanted to create a submit button? What's the tag that we start with?
Submit.
Input type equals submit.
Very good. Input type equals submit. And how do we customize that button's text? To maybe say, name my dog.
Is it value equals my dog?
Very good. In this case, when we're creating the submit button, we use the attribute value to customize that button. Name my dog. Awesome. So we just covered classes back in Java, and now we're touching back here to HTML. So any questions about the two things we just covered?
I thought input was self-closing. Does it need the backslash at the end?
Technically, you do not. HTML understands that you don't need that, but I always put in there for best practice just so I know where my ending is. So I do it personally just for peace of mind and slight OCD, but technically you do not have to. It's just to know that this bracket is closed by itself at the very end, instead of having to second guess if there's a closing bracket somewhere else that you're missing kind of thing. So it's, again, it's just for personal preference.
Right. Okay, that explains something about VS Code that was mystifying me. That was throwing those brackets in, those backslashes for me, even if I didn't want them.
Yeah, it is a typical standard to put those in there, just so just so you know that it's self-closing kind of thing.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
Absolutely. All right, everybody happy that HTML's back? Anybody miss HTML?
Me.
Right? It's fun.
Yeah.
HTML is fun. You get to make stuff. All right. Well, everybody ready to have the talk? We're going to be having a talk about the internet because that's what we're going to be designing for into the future. And we kind of want to talk about exactly what is the internet. You probably already have some conception of it. As of right now, you are sitting in front of a screen. That is whatever, probably Zoom, my face, my presentation. This is all a user interface. But say on your computer that you open up a browser, say to look up the weather. You're in a browser. You're now connected to the internet. But what exactly is the internet? Where is that weather coming from? It kind of can feel a little bit nebulous or general. What exactly is all this data? Where is it at? Because I'll tell you this, my computer does not have all of the weather information in the world. It has to be coming from somewhere. And that somewhere is out in the wild, out in the cloud, out in the internet. And what we do is that we connect to the internet using a request. We say, I want to go get the weather. And you tell the internet, you're requested from the internet to get that weather. What we say to the internet is, I want to get weather.com. This is called a GET request. The GET request says, I want to get weather.com. And then it comes back and says, absolutely, let's see what that weather is. And we have that response come back. That's what it's called whenever the weather, or whenever the internet returns us something. It's called a response. This is the general setup of how we get our data from day-to-day life. Any questions about this in particular? Because we get to keep moving on then. So we need to look very, very closely at what we mean by the internet. That thing that was taking in those responses taking in those requests and sending us back responses, out in the wild, this is called a controller. It controls the requests and response that are coming to a server where all that information is held, in particular, the weather information. Inside of controllers or inside applications, servers in general, things that we're going to be building here in the future, we also have things called models. But you might have already seen this before. Models is exactly kind of what we just did with that dog class. It is a structure of data. Models are types of classes, types of data structures that essentially help us structure our database and how information is received and how it's sent back, how we store information. It's the structure of the data and the logic within our server. Finally, we have view. View is exactly, again, what you saw. It's that HTML. It's what the user actually sees. That's what the view is in this. So this is MVC. We have our M, which is model, V is in view, and C as in controller. But how do they exactly operate together? Well, when that request comes into the controller, the request is then modeled in a certain way using those data structures that we have, such as dog. You can also use something very, very primitive like integers or strings that are non-primitive, but a little bit more simplistic. But the request comes in as data, and then it's structured using models. Next up, that data that's now in a set model is then shaped using the logic also within the models to provide a start of a response. So say you wanted to name that dog information comes in, it gets modeled as a dog, and then that data is then going to be shaped by the view. How do we want to actually picture a dog? How can we make a dog look pretty to our users that are on our UI, on our website? That's what the view does, and then it structures it and sends it back to the controller to make it look pretty. Once it looks pretty, that controller is like, okay, it's all ready, send it back out. So it sends it back to our user that's on a laptop somewhere in another country or right across the street. This is MVC and how it works. And in the end, one more thing to throw in there, Spring, the name of Spring, is kind of the glue that holds us all together. It's how we can design MVC in Java. Spring is that toolbox that we're going to be using to do this. Now, I know I just said a lot of stuff, and I know it was definitely a lot. And this is the start of MVC, but don't feel like you had to understand everything I just said. We're not going to be looking too into depth on the views just yet, or the control, or on the models just yet. So take all of this as things we're going to be diving deeper into, but definitely not something that you have to come to terms with or understand right off the bat. So I'll leave it open here for questions just for a second to see if anybody has any kind of questions or want any extra clarification around any of these parts. Anything at all? All right. I'm assuming everyone's got it then. Everyone's got it. All right. Well, then let's dive just a little bit deeper into talking about that master of everything, that controller, the person who controls the requests and the response. Remember, the first thing that a controller sees is the request. That request comes in from somewhere, someone's computer, someone is trying to talk to your server to get your information. Say they want to do the get. In most of the cases that we're going to be working with studios as well as exercises, you'll see a path like this. This is called a path. You'll see http:// which you've probably seen already out in the wild when you're typing in Google or another search engine or anything on the web. Then you'll see localhost. Localhost in its bare essentials just means your computer. You're talking to your own computer, :8080, which is the port. We have think of it just as a shipping lane. Our computer has a bunch of shipping lanes and needs to know where your data is coming in and out of, which is a port. Then we have /dog. This is the start of this is our request that we're sending to our controller. When a request comes into the controller, we need something to catch it. We need something to deal with this request. So we start building a controller. A controller is going to look just like a normal class. It's going to say public class dog controller. But the thing that Spring does and helps us with, and the thing we have to do to tell our application this is a controller for requests, is that now we need to start adding annotations. So we add the @controller annotation at the top of this class. Remember, annotations help our compiler know what we want to do in particular with a class or a method. That's what this annotation is doing, saying this is something special here. All right, so let's take a little bit closer look at this dog path that we have down here from localhost. We have /dog. Localhost 8080 or www.google.com is a domain. But when you put a slash at the end of a domain, you start going into subdomains or different paths inside of that website. Here I'm saying I want to go to my localhost, my computer's at port 8080, my server, and go to /dog, a different path. I want you to find me this. When this happens, we need to be able, again, in our controller, to understand that's what the user wants. They sent over a GET request. So we need to make sure that when they send over a GET request for /dog, we have something to catch it. So we have an annotation called get mapping, quotations, dog. This means when I go to /dog, it will go directly to this annotation. We then add @response body, a secondary annotation to say it's going to have a response to send back to our users. And then we have a method. We say public string, then whatever we want our method name to be, and then we return something. In this case, it's going to be a string because that's our data type that we're going to return. So what does this mean? It means that when that request gets sent over to the controller, it's going to go find this get mapping that we just built here, and it's going to return bark. So our response back to our users is just going to be bark. Simple, right? So, anybody got a question before I call on people? Because I'm afraid that people are a little too quiet on this Monday right now.
Will there always be a get mapping to go with the response body?
As of right now, yes, get mappings, there will be a get mapping for any get request that we want to handle. So yes, right now, Get will be one of the only ones that we're going to be talking about. Well, we'll talk about a different kind of mapping here shortly. But to get information or to get a website, you will want to do a get mapping.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll dive a little bit more into that question there. I don't want to do any not plot twists, what is that called? Spoilers. I don't want to do any spoilers just yet on this one. All right, so before we go any further, we're actually gonna go see this in action. Has anyone seen this website yet?
Yes.
Yeah.
Awesome. It's from our exercise. So this is called a Spring Initializer. What it's doing is just helps you build a Spring application pretty quickly. I'm going to take you through this because this will help you with your studios as well as your exercises here, starting out with MVCs. You want to make sure that Gradle project is selected. You want to make sure your language, of course, is Java. And then down here, your directions are a little off just because it might be slightly outdated. Versions come out very quickly, so it's hard to keep documentation exactly up to par. But I'm going to recommend selecting 2.3.8. I down here just have the group org.launch code, and then my artifact or my project name's gonna just be example-pet, something arbitrary that I just made up. Description, whatever you want it to be. Package, it'll build it for you. Coming down here, you wanna make sure jar is selected, and then Java 15. It says Java 13 in our instructions, but Java 13 is not a selection here. I would recommend doing the version above 13, and then we'll correct it later. So, once this is done, make sure your two dependencies are in here as well, Spring Web and Spring Boot Dev Tools. This one I know caused some slight confusion just because of the outdated material on the book and just this section. Any questions about this website? Okay, once you're finished, click Generate, and what it's going to do is going to download a zip file to your site. Then you want to go into Finder. Second. So give me 1 sec. I know this was going to be the hardest part to do this. I'm not a master of Macs just yet. There we go. So I'm going to drag my zip file into where I keep all my LC stuff. Come over here. When I come over here for Macs, you double click and it will get your project up and running just like that. So once that is all finished, we're going to go over here. We're going to open our project. And LC gets, and what did I say? Example pet. Perfect. Open. And voila. We have our Spring Boot application all started. What's going to happen here is that the Gradle is going to build, which does kind of sometimes take a few minutes here and there, depending on just internet speed, how many dependencies you have in your Gradle. The question might be, what even is Gradle? Just remember, like with NPM in JavaScript, we have a lot of dependencies, other libraries that really we can bring in that other people have created to help us out with stuff. Gradle is a way to manage that. We can add dependencies, things other people have created, to bring into our application and make it a whole lot better. So once Gradle's done, you should see a build successful in so many amount of seconds or minutes. And we're here. This is it. So let's quickly explore. What is the starting point that all Java applications have to have?
Main method.
A main method. So we know then, if that's true, this application needs to have a main method somewhere in it. So if we go to in here, we see that this is where everything starts from. This is the main method. When we press start, when we press our Gradle build, this is going to kick off. So let's go ahead and do that real quick. Up here is that Gradle icon. When I first had to get into Gradle, I could not find it for the life of me. It's up here in the top right for most IntelliJs. Then we come into tasks, application, and then boot run. Double click and it will start our server. Oh, one thing, I even wrote it down to do this. After you do all that, like I said, I did it on 15, but I do not want to do 15. I want to come in here and edit my source compatibility to 13. What does this mean? I'm just decreasing the Java level from 15 to 13, something that's in my domain. So try that again. There we go, and our server should start running. It will take a second to boot up.
Can I ask a question while it's booting?
Yeah, what's up?
So when you opened up the file from your browser or from your file browser, it looked like there was several files in there. Which one did you click? It was called a Gradle file, or like what's in the folder when Spring generates that for you?
So let's go back to the Finder. So did you say in here?
Yeah, so you double click that and now you've got, it looks like build, Gradle, source. Which one did you open and what are these files?
I opened the project. So this is the project folder.
Uh-huh.
If we look in here, all of those things you just named off are right in here.
Oh,
That was our project. Yep. So go ahead, sorry. Oh, sorry about that. Go ahead. I didn't hear that last part.
I thought that you had opened one of those files. I didn't realize the project was what you opened.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no worries. Yeah, just clicked on the individual folder and opened that because that has all of our guts of our application inside of it. So we need the whole thing. Yeah, and that's a great, excellent question because it has our build Gradle in it, which are all of our settings for Gradle. Remember, Gradle is necessary to bring in those dependencies. We need to build bigger and better applications. So we got to make sure that all of that's in there. Great question. Okay, so we have our server going. So if I go to a fun browser here, post 8080 form, don't want that. Go to this, we're gonna get that error. Why do we get an error? Because I just sent a request out to our server and there's no controller to handle anything I just typed here. If I type in /dog, I sent a request, a GET request for /dog, there's nothing there. So it's gonna be like, I have no idea what you're talking about and I'm gonna throw an error because I'm not happy with you. So instead of it being angry at us, let's go ahead and build that dog controller real quick. What we do is that we come into our project under the main into Java, and then into our example.pet, we're gonna say new package. And then I'm gonna put controllers here. If I can spell it right. Inside of controllers, this is where I'm going to put that dog controller that we already talked about previously. And I'm just gonna create a typical class, nothing special. And then what do we put at the top of our class to start out our controller?
Pet controller.
Very good. We gotta put that annotation. There we go. Report. Perfect. All right, let's start creating something to capture that GET request that's coming over to us from our browser. What's the first thing we need to do to start accepting a GET request? What was that annotation?
Get mapping.
It's mapping. Very good. And then in here goes the subdirectory. What was that subdirectory that we asked in particular on this URL?
Dog.
Dog.
Very good. Dog. Awesome. Now we need to tell it that we're going to have a response to this request. How do we say we're going to have a response to it?
Response.
Response body. Very good. And now it's yelling at us because we don't have a method. So say public void out public string. I want to return a string back because I have a response body. String mark. There we go, and it's yelling at me still because I don't have anything to return. So I'm just going to return mark. All right, once I'm done editing my controller, a big thing we need to do is restart our server. Otherwise, those changes are not going to be there. So it's going to restart the server now. Now I'm going to take a drink of water.
Wait a minute, rewind. How do you start the server again? How did you restart it?
All right. This actually looks kind of like a rewind button. Right up here, it has this run. And then what it's going to say is that, do you want to stop and run? And you say yes. If it's the first time you're running your application, you need to go to Gradle, Tasks, Application, Boot Run, and double click. But once you do that, then you can just start it up here from the top. Did that make sense, or do you want me to show you how I did it?
No, that's tight.
Okay. All right. So everybody ready for this magic? I'm a UI, I'm across the world, and I really want to be barked in my face. I press enter, and bam, we just changed the world. We can now bark at all of our users by going to localhost 8080/dog. Because again, I sent over that GET request to our server that we just built, and it returned me back a string called bark. And that's what I'm seeing on my screen here. Any questions about this voodoo magic?
Yes.
What's up?
So I'm trying to place this in the locus of information that I've already learned from launch code, and I'm mentally comparing it to Angular. So is this to Java like Angular was to JavaScript? Is this a framework that works as basically a server, a virtual server?
Technically, yes. You can kind of compare it to Angular. Yes. I'm going to give you leeway with that one. Yes, yes, yes. You can think about it that way. Angular, every time you started up Angular, it built a server to put your UI on. Angular builds user interfaces. We built websites with JavaScript and with Angular. MVC builds the other side. We call it the back end, or where all the data has fun and is stored, and you can do things. UIs are to see something pretty, and MVC models are to do some hardcore thinking. But in Angular, something that is very, just like kind of what we're doing here, is that Angular, whenever you do want to write or draw out that UI, you start up a server. So, yes.
Huh.
I know. I'm sorry. And I'm trying to, I don't want to tell you anything too much there. Think of Angular as the UI that would talk to the MVC. Angular would be the website, or the thing that you would make the website that would actually talk to what we're talking to right now.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Yeah, I think it'll become more clear as we move forward just a little bit. But don't connect it too much to Angular. Take that one with a pretty big grain of salt. But you are kind of seeing how the internet's interacting, just like you did in that Angular practice. Okay. Sorry, guys, I'm going to have to start some things back up here. Okay, so we have our dog barking to us. So let's keep going here. This one we already did. Yeah, we already did this. My face. So let's get going on this one then. So we just talked about building a controller for just barking. So we're going to take it a little bit further now. We are going to send a GET request again. And this time it's going to be to localhost port 8080/dog/Stark. As you can see, we appended Stark onto this. Stark here is going to be something very special, though. It's not going to be a subdirectory kind of. It's going to be more of a variable, something that we can change to interact with our website. So let's see how we can do that. As always, we build our controller just like this: public class dog controller, @controller. And then what we're going to do is do a GET mapping with something a little bit special here. We have dog/name. This is a new kind of mapping. We still use that same annotation, but we just do something a smidge different there to help us out. Let's see what it does. We're going to keep adding that response body on there. Nothing changes. And then we have our typical method here, public string bark, but we added something new to it. We added this path variable annotation. Stark above was a path variable. That's what this special thing is. And down here is where we say we need to have that. One thing you might point out is that these two have to be named the exact same. Name has to rely on the path variable name that you passed in as a parameter. This is a way we can pass in variables within the path of our controller. Let's see this in action. All right, so I said we needed to do what to our get mapping to take in a path variable, particularly for name.
Slash curly bracket name.
Very good. So slash curly bracket name. So there we go. We're taking in this variable. What is this variable called again?
Name.
Correct. Sorry, the variable name is name, but what type of variable is it?
Path variable.
Oh, string.
It's a string too. That's the data type. I also heard path variable. It is a path variable, which is a string, named name. But the path variable, if it's a path variable, we have to add an annotation. That annotation is path variable, string, and then name. What this does is that when we send over a GET request with dog/anything, it's going to assume that's name and pass it into our path variable here. So what we can do is put name down here and use that in our response. So let's go ahead and see what this does. While this is rerunning, any questions about what we just did with path variables?
So you don't have to use this in front of it?
So remember, this is used to access class variables, not parameters.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
So yes, technically this one you wouldn't have to use this because
I
name
thought
is
as
just a
much,
parameter.
but it just needed to be asked. So.
No, very good. Yeah, no, absolutely. Completely fine to get some clarification on that. All right, it looks like our application has started back up. Well, let's go ahead and see what happens if I just click dog here. So what just happened? /dog no longer exists. That path /dog was edited. So /dog doesn't exist anymore. So my application's like, okay, you sent a GET request for nothing that exists. I couldn't find it anywhere in any of your controllers. Because what it's looking for now is dog/start. And now it can find it. It can find that mapping. It can find that route. So now it says Stark barks.
We have both working. Like keep the one that return dog, and we have another link that take us there to the second one.
So you said you wanted both to work?
Yeah. Then
For sure.
just keep the other.
I'm gonna call this one bark with no name. Take out that path variable. Take out that path variable up here and reset this to just barks. So we save that, rerun. There we go. Start it up. Let's see if this still works. Refresh. Also, by the way, always remember you refresh. Always, always, always refresh. And there we go. So /dog barks and /cookie says cookie barks. That's how we would create two different routes inside of one controller.
Okay.
Does that help out a little bit?
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Any other questions about this?
Yeah.
Is there a limit to how many routes you could have?
I'm sure there's technically a limit somewhere, but I don't know the exact number. It's kind of those questions from last lecture. I don't know exactly the exact number, but the one important thing to know is that you can have pretty much as many routes as you're going to need, but you have to make sure that they're unique. So you have to make sure that your get mapping here, everything in the quotes is unique. Otherwise, you're going to have collisions and Spring is not going to be happy with you. But in the end, I doubt you'll ever run out of routes to use. They're pretty much endless.
Gotcha.
Then is this like kind of routing when we need to pass data that need to show on the page when we are going to that specific link? And the routing that we learned before with Angular is just more for when we click link and it's going to take us to a specific page.
So these mappings are for that as well. They're for passing data as well as for navigating websites here in the future. So no, when you click a button and you want to go specifically to /cat instead of /dog, that still exists here, and we're going to learn about that into the future. But yep, both of those functionalities are actually what this mapping stuff does.
Okay, thanks.
Absolutely.
Oh, that's good.
All right, so let's talk a little bit more here. We're going to keep going with these GET requests. The next thing we're going to do here is another GET request, localhost 8080/dog ? Name equals Stark. Now you have probably seen this if you looked very close at majority of URL bar or URLs or website names that are up in your URL bar. This right here is called a parameter. This is a way that we can insert data into a URL without having to declare separate paths. That path variable is useful somewhat, but if we don't want to make like 18 paths just to pass in 18 different variables, we can do that instead in the parameters. This helps us out a lot. So let's see how we can exactly incorporate this into our controller then. As always, we start out with that annotation at controller, public class dog controller. And we say get mapping dog, just like we did before, that response body. And now we're going to do something called public string bark, which we've seen before, but that @request param string name. This is something new. We use a different annotation here than path variable, because remember path variable had that @ path variable. This one has request param or request parameter annotation. And now we can use that name that comes in through there in our return statement here, name plus barks. Kind of just what we saw in, again, that path variable example. Another thing you'll see again is that these have to be the same. The name parameter has to correlate exactly how it's spelt in the request param inside of your method. This is extremely important. Let's go and quickly see this one in action as well. So I take out the name, and instead of path variable here, I'm going to put request param. I'm going to call it name once more. Say that, there we go. So just to make sure we are not colliding in any kind of way, I'm going to comment that out and then restart our server. There we go, come on. Okay, start it up. Come back up here, dog, and then how do we start our parameters again? What was that? What was the symbol that we used to start indicate the start of our parameters? What symbol was it? Question mark. Very good. And then we have the name of our parameter, and then quotes Stark, just like that. Press enter. We say Stark barks. No, I forgot what we have. Yep. So now we're taking it a parameter. It's coming through there, going to our method in our controller, and it is making it say Stark barks. That's our request body coming back, or response body coming back. So that's just how to add a parameter. Any questions on that?
Mm-hmm.
It's just another way to take in information. So we're kind of just like getting our feet wet here, how to take in information exactly and how we can use that with controllers. So let's just take a look at one more example just with parameters here. Say we wanted to do a GET request again with Stark, as well as another one, age. Stark is a string, while age is an integer. But also take a close look at this, that we separated them using the ampersand. That's how we separate parameters. So let's go and build our controller. As always, we do our controller. We do our get mapping on dog, request or response body, and then bark will take in 2 request params. Remember that our names have to stay consistent. Our name goes to start, that parameter in particular, and then our int age.
Question.
Yes.
Do you have to put 2 request parameter annotations, or can you just do one and then put a comma after the variable?
That is a good question. Let's just see that one. Let's take a look at that. All right. Stop it.
Yeah, you can. I've been doing it.
You've been doing it? Cool. Int age and is.
I didn't double the request param annotation up.
All right. Save that. Let's go and see.
Remove the second request parameter.
You want to remove this one?
The second one, I don't.
The second annotation.
Oh, I'm sorry. Maybe I misheard the question. What was the what did you want to see exactly?
No, I was wondering if you just have to put request parameter once, and then your variables you list with one after a comma.
I believe so. You want to put your annotations next to those individual parameters. Yes. Unless any of the TAs know any in particular thing with MVC and those annotations for Spring, because I know sometimes you can boil down, but I believe request param is pretty picky about being in the parameter spot. Anybody?
I'm able to use it without it.
Okay, maybe we can see. So did you just put it there, or did you just not put it in at all?
I just have it, the one you just actually removed, I only have the first one in the parameters there.
Oh, like that, okay.
And then, yeah, just using a comma
that
to separate the second.
Yeah, let's take a look. All right, oh, I gotta restart. Go. Oh, cool. Yeah, you absolutely can. I would say for practice though, definitely put them in front of every variable if they're a request parameter. Java, and just like JavaScript and Java, things can be forgiving, but that doesn't mean we should necessarily use them right off the bat. So I like this, but I would be concerned just for practice, put request param in front of all of the parameters that are request parameters. Of course, do whatever if it feels best for you all. But to start out, I would recommend putting those annotations as many places as you need. So nothing's caught off guard kind of thing. But in the end, you are your own developer. So so in my example, I'm going to be continuing to put request parameters in front of any of these. But do with what you want for the examples. But Adam, thank you for bringing that up too, because I did not know that. So that's really cool. All right. Any other questions about the request parameters, about how we separate the request parameters, anything like that? Cool. All right, everybody, let's keep going. So we're going to go over a few things just to make sure we're all on the same page with this. First things first, just talked about it. What is the symbol that we use to separate parameters in a URL?
And
Question mark.
Ampersand.
Very good, that ampersand. Remember, question marks are the start of the parameters, and equal signs goes between the parameter's name and its value. So we're going to be typically using 3 major symbols there, but ampersand is the one that separates parameters. In the example, www.mysite.com/text/here, if here was a variable, it would be called a what kind of variable?
Path variable.
Very good, a path variable. It's inside the path, and it's a variable, hence the word path variable. And that leads us to the annotation that we use, @path variable. Let's move forward. The blank is a part of the MVC architecture that deals with requests and responses. Who is that master of requests and responses?
Controller.
Very good. Our friend, the controller, does all the cool stuff. All right. There are 8 bits in a byte, but only 4 bits in a what? Everyone's getting the other ones, so I got to get a little harder. And I had to go nerdy today. So who can tell me if you only have 4 bytes, what is that?
4 bits,
What is it?
a half a byte.
Half a byte? Kind of. It's a nibble. Kind of like a half byte.
Oh my god.
That is actually what 4 bits is called. 4 bits is a nibble. 8 bits is a byte. I love that when I found that out. I thought it was hilarious. All right. So everyone take that deep breath. We're almost there, I promise. But now we're gonna get into more fun stuff. Like we said, we missed our old friend HTML. So let's go ahead and start using that and making things look a little bit better in our requests. As always, we have our GET request here, that HTTP localhost port 8080/dog, and we just want to make things look just a bit better. So we have our GET mapping here. We always have dog. What's the next annotation we always add?
Response body.
Response body,
Very good. Response body. And then what's after that?
path variable.
Not path variable. In this one, we're not going to have any path variables or any parameters. So, but that would be what goes into the parentheses. So if we did, that's where it would go. But in this case, we just want to start writing our method. So we say public string bark, just again, that arbitrary method name that I created. And now we get to start doing the fun stuff. We can start injecting HTML into our responses here. So what's the tag that we always start with for HTML to build a website?
HTML.
HTML, very good. Been saying a lot of the answers in my sentences tonight. Yes, HTML, and then what we do to see things actually on our site is body. So we say HTML and then body, and then we start just adding things to our page. So in this case, I'm gonna make a header here that says my dog page in H2 size. And then finally, I have to close my body as well as my HTML. This is as simple as it gets for putting HTML into our responses. So let's go and see that. What I'm going to do here is just comment this out, and we're going to just create a quick get mapping, just like we did before. There we go. And then we have HTML. We have our body. And then a cool thing that if you didn't see on the exercise that actually taught me too, I really like this, is that if you press enter inside of the quotes, you can actually get a line appended. I really, really like that, especially for this stuff, because we can write, sometimes we have to write a lot of HTML.
Yeah, that's really nice.
/H2. And then /body /HTML. Uh-oh. There we go. We save that. We rerun this. I go get my laptop charger before it dies. There we go. Started that application up. Let's go ahead and refresh this. And look at that. We have H2. Awesome. We are on our way of creating an awesome dog page. Any questions about what we just did? The best way this is going to really click in everyone's head, most likely, is when you do get your hands dirty with it. I know me just doing examples up here might not be the best or explain exactly what's going on, but it is just a start. So I definitely recommend in your studio getting very acquainted with this. All right, we're gonna move on to a more fun approach here. We're gonna click the button, but in this one, we're gonna just start out by, of course, creating our controller here. I've been asking this one, but for that /dog, what is the first annotation we always do to build our method? What's that first annotation?
Get mapping.
Very good. Get mapping, and what goes inside of its parentheses?
Dog.
Dog, the actual path you want to go to. So then we have our at response body and then our bark. And then we're going to build something a little bit bigger here. What we're going to do is do h2 my dog page, just like we did last time. But this one, we're going to build a form. What's that? How do we start with? Well, I said it again in the sentence, didn't I? We start with form. Very good. But we're going to add a few extra attributes to this one. And you might have seen this in the exercise or any of your reading that you might have done through for this MVC. And that is action, add, as well as method, post. We'll talk about this one in a second. Let's go ahead and just add some things in here. We're going to add a text box. We know it's a text box because we said type text. And then our name is going to be name. And then we have a submit button that just is going to say add. That's really it. So this action here, what we did in our form is that when we are sending information back to our controller, which we'll see how we do this here in a second, it's going to say, hey, I want you to go to your add controller, or I want you to go to your add directory, your add subdirectory. So instead of going to dog, which you already are on, I want you to go over to /add. And then we have the second thing here, method post. So far, you have seen a method. It hasn't been post, but what its name is get. It's how we send information. We're telling it how we're going to send it information. We have been doing gets, but in this one, I'm saying I want you to do a post. So let's just talk briefly about what I mean by doing a post. So you already know what gets are. Gets us our website, gets us our information. It essentially builds the page. That's what a lot of GET requests are going to do. They're going to build a page for you. Something awesome to interact with. In that example we just did, we were creating a text box here and a submit button that says add exclamation point. So just pretend that this is actually your browser here. All you would really have up there is that text box and that button. So I included my dog's name, which is always going to be Stark. And then I clicked that add button. When I click that add button, what happens because of what we just put there in that form line is it does a post request. It sends a post request to our controller. And it says, I want you to go to localhost port 8080/add. And I want you to have my information, my dog's name that is provided to you when you go over there. Again, this comes from that form tag that we did. We did that action that said add, and we did that method that says post. That's how our web browser knew what to do to send information over to our controller. So really take a close look at that. So what this post does is that it's going to send information over to our controller. So we need to build something inside of our controller here to actually deal with that. So when it sends that data over, we need to have a new annotation here called a post mapping that has inside of it the exact subdirectory that we want to go to, which is in this case add. The second annotation has not changed. It stays response body. And then we have a request param here for name. Remember, name has to be the exact same thing that we're sending over. The name of our text box was name. The name of our request parameter is name. These match up, and they have to help our data flow work. So, any question, oh, sorry, yeah, name. Any question in particular about this one?
Yeah, can you please repeat it one more time?
Yeah, I absolutely can if you want. Is that true? You want it?
Yeah.
Okay, how about this? We'll do it again, but as practice as we're going through it.
Okay.
Coming over to here, we want to create a form. Like we did, we want to say form, and then how do we say which subdirectory we want to go to? What was the attribute called? Anybody?
Action.
Action, very good. And we say we wanted to go to add. As you saw, I use single quotes in this. That's because I'm within double quotes. So if I made another double quote and that string, that would just make it look messy. So use single quotes in this case. What was the second attribute we needed to say we wanted to do a post request?
Method.
Method, very good. We say post. And then I'm going to close off that, press enter. I'm going to create my closing bracket for form because that's my OCD at work. And I'm going to come back up here and I'm going to create my input, which was a text field. Input type text. And then name is name. For help here, I'm going to say dog's name so we don't have the name going everywhere. That's irritating. Input type equals submit. Enter that. And then the value is going to be add, just like we said. So any questions about this HTML?
You need another single quote after post, right?
You said post, but
Post.
yeah, there it is. Okay, thank you. Yep, absolutely do. So you got that. Oh, I need a new quote here too. Fantastic. All right, let's rerun this and see what happens. Oh, I don't even know why I'm rerunning this because what's going to happen whenever we click that button? Do we have a controller yet in our controllers to deal with add?
No.
No, we don't. So let's go and do that, just so we don't waste time. Come in here. Oh, what am I doing? I'm already in here. So we need to create a host mapping. And in here, what are we going to put? What's the directory that our form's going to go to when it's clicked?
Add.
Add, very good. What's our secondary annotation we always do on these fun things?
Request by.
Response body, awesome. And then we're going to say public string add the dog. Now remember, when we click submit on that form, it's going to be sending us back something. What's that something that's going to be sending us back?
Dog name?
Dog name, very good. Remember, it has to look exactly like it had, or like exactly what our name was. So we do that, and then I'm going to return HTML real quick. HTML. H2. Dog name was added. And then I do /h2 /body /HTML. So many slashes. All right, there we go. Save that. Anybody see anything wrong?
Nope.
All right, let's try this out. All right, our application started. Moment of truth. Let's go to our dog. So we have our text box here and our add button. This is Stark. Press add, and it says Stark was added. What we just did, and what I'm going to show you here too, is that if you go ahead, you've done this in JavaScript, this should be nothing new, going to the inspect option. But one thing I'm going to introduce you to here is that we had our elements, we've seen our console, but there's this fourth tab over here called network. Network is seeing everything that we're sending out as requests and getting back as responses from our server in our browser. So let's take a look a little bit closer at what we just did here. Let's refresh. And we sent out a request for dog, going to that /dog. And what we got back was our HTML. So now we want to send over a request, a post request, to say Stark. You press add. And as you can see, add was submitted here. We sent over a post and it immediately made us get a GET request. So it said Stark was added. Oh, excuse me. I sent over a post request and immediately got us back that HTML. So we sent over that post request and it responded back, response back with our HTML. Stark was added. So don't get too involved too much at this network thing. It was kind of just to show anybody who wanted to see what was actually happening at a slower pace. That's what this network tab is helping you out with. But in the end, what was happening is that when we clicked add, the one thing to really take down is that when we click add, that's when the post request is sent to our controller to be dealt with. So that being said, that is all we have here. So I'm going to open up to questions for that last bit and anything about gets or anything with MVCs here. Well, we still have just a bit of time.
What
What's the difference between get mapping and post mapping, and how do you know which one to use?
That's a very good question. So real quick, GET requests are typically going to be used to get websites. Post requests are going to be done on actions, like when you click buttons or you type in text boxes. That's a way to quickly differentiate. What's different though? GET requests, as we saw when we were doing GET requests, have parameters. Let's go quickly over to it. Have parameters within their URL. So this is the only thing you'll see on GET requests. Typically, post requests, you don't want to do any inline request parameters. Posts send data a little bit more secretively. They send it out of sight is the best way to put it. As you can see, GET requests have in-site data. It has it right there in the URL. Posts kind of do it under the table. So that's kind of a different, that's a bigger differentiation between the two. But typically with GET requests, you want to get a website back. So you want to make a nice website for your user to see. And when they press a button like add or delete or something like that, that's when you typically send a post request over to your controllers.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Any other questions about this? This is where the fun starts coming in with Java, because we get to make some websites and everything. Wouldn't it be fun?
I have one question.
Yeah.
Okay, so is it necessary to have a aid method to receive a post response? Because inside the book there was no like method specifically for the post, but we did add like the inside of the HTML, inside of the form, like method is post, but we really don't have like any post method specifically to like receive that response.
So in the example given in the exercise, technically it was kind of under wraps. Do Hello Spring here. If you look in this one right here, this is something we didn't really talk about too much. We have a request mapping. So we did get mapping up here, and then instead of doing a post mapping, because they did two different types of request methods, they do a post here too.
Oh.
So in the example, you might see a request method.post.
Okay.
What the difference is between a get mapping and this request mapping? Well, the request mapping, you can put in a couple more values here to make it more, well, let's say customizable, a little bit more flexible. But I did the post mapping and the get mapping just for simplicity in these examples.
Okay.
But feel free, everyone, to use this if they want for gets and posts, or gets and posts at the same time.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it is necessary to have the posts. Like you.
It's not necessary unless you have a button or some kind of action on your website that you want to have it receive.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely. So everybody, if you just have a website, like kind of what we did in one of our one of our assignments, it's just a website about you, but doesn't have any buttons on it, or about something that you want to write about, doesn't have any actions on it. Typically, then you might not see a post in your controller. But if it has, like, if it's a banking website and you're constantly clicking on things, there might be a few post requests in your controller. All right. Any other questions? Anybody? Oh, and then I haven't even done them. Anything at all? I promise it might be intimidating at first, but I feel that you guys will like this a bit, just because we are dabbling back in HTML. We're doing these fun talkings and get to learn how the internet really does work on day-to-day life. That's what I really liked about this section. But if no one else has any questions, anything else, I'm going to then release you all to go and have fun with this studio into your separate groups. Thank you as always for watching. Let me go ahead and stop sharing there. But thank you guys for participating. I know it is kind of a very gloomy Monday, so I'm happy with everybody who's been able to talk and everything like that. So have a great week, especially a great start to your week. Stay safe, stay healthy, and then I will see everyone back here on Thursday.
You too, Kyle. Thank
All
you.
right. See you
Absolutely.
Thursday.
Thank you,
Thanks a
Kyle.
lot.
Bye, everybody.
Kyle.
Have a good
Bye,
evening.
guys. You
Thanks,
too.
Thank you. Bye, Kyle.
Bye, everybody.
Hey, Kyle, if you want to hang on here for a sec,
Yeah, absolutely.
you can stop recording.
Yep.